In 1973, a Soviet airbase locked down tighter than a fortress, where even trusted mechanics were watched for the slightest hint of betrayal. Yet during the Cold War's most paranoid years, one young technician named Yevgeny Vronsky pulled off the unthinkable, stealing a frontline MiG jet and vanishing from Soviet control. How did a mechanic outsmart the KGB and NATO radar, and why was his escape seen as an existential threat to both East and West? The answer begins with the nature of fear behind the Iron Curtain. In the early 1970s, NATO's air defense stretched across Europe, forming a dense electronic shield. The NATO air defense ground environment, known as NADGE, connected radar stations from the North Sea to the Alps. Each site equipped with long-range radars such as ANFPS-20 and advanced European 3D models scanned airspace up to 400 kilometers away. In West Germany, stations at Meschstetten, Auenhausen and Brocksettel created overlapping coverage, ensuring that any high-flying aircraft would appear on several screens within minutes. The system's backbone was ground-controlled intercept logic. When an unidentified aircraft crossed the inner German border, radar data flowed instantly to regional centers. Each contact was assigned a track number, checked against flight plans, and interrogated for IFF codes. If the response failed, controllers flagged it as unknown and began threat evaluation. Quick reaction, alert fighters, F-4 Phantoms and F-104 Starfighters stood ready at nearby bases, guided by precise instructions from controllers. At medium altitude, the radar net was nearly airtight. A jet entering from East Germany would be detected within 250 kilometers of the border, giving defenders about 10 to 15 minutes to respond. Yet the system's reach faded at low altitude. Terrain and the Earth's curve limited detection to 80 or 100 kilometers, sometimes less. Here, the radar web's density became both its strength and its vulnerability. Inside every Soviet air regiment, surveillance was a daily fact of life. KGB officers attached to frontline squadrons maintained secret files on every pilot and technician. These dossiers tracked not just flying skills, but party loyalty, family background, and even offhand remarks. A pilot's access to an aircraft depended as much on his political record as his technical qualifications. Routine security reviews combed for any sign of foreign contact or ideological wavering. Even a joke about life in the West could find its way into a personal file, flagged as a mark of unreliability. In East Germany, where Soviet units operated close to NATO borders, the scrutiny only intensified. Officers faced restrictions on travel, contact with locals, and even private phone calls. The KGB Special Department watched for any breach, letters abroad, unauthorized absences, or unexplained friendships. Informers, often fellow officers, reported on conversations in the barracks and canteen. Every movement around the flight line was logged and checked. Aircraft sat under the eyes of armed guards, with access limited to those on official duty. Base commanders lived with constant reminders of the consequences. A single defection could trigger disciplinary boards, demotions, and the threat of criminal charges for negligence. The fear of losing a jet to the West was more than embarrassment. It risked exposing Soviet technology and undermined the regime's claim of total control. In this atmosphere of suspicion, trust was rationed, and every day carried the weight of potential betrayal. Yevgeny Vronsky was just 23 when his name appeared on Cold War defection lists. Official records describe him not as a pilot, but as a lieutenant and aircraft mechanic stationed at Grossenhain airfield in East Germany. The base, home to Soviet Su-7 fighter bombers, kept its flight line under constant watch. Yet Vronsky's technical skills set him apart from most ground crew. He had access to maintenance hangars and, more unusually, to the regiment's flight simulator. This privilege came from a friendship with a pilot instructor who let him practice basic maneuvers after hours. While he never qualified for flight duty, Vronsky learned the essentials of takeoff and simple in-air handling. He had no formal training in navigation or landing. The combination of youth, technical know-how, and limited simulator experience made the idea of a solo escape seem almost impossible. Yet, for someone with access to both the cockpit and the rhythms of daily base life, the line between routine maintenance and a desperate gamble was thinner than most realized. The MiG-25, known in NATO circles as the Foxbat, stood at the cutting edge of Soviet aviation in the early 1970s. Designed for blistering speed and high-altitude interception, it could reach Mach 2.8 and climb above 20,000 meters, outpacing most Western fighters and even threatening the American SR-71. Its Tumansky R-15 turbojet engines, each pushing over 100 kilonewtons of thrust with afterburner, were a marvel of brute force, though their steel-heavy construction limited sustained top speed to mere minutes before risking engine failure. The MiG's combat radius hovered around 600 kilometers, enough for a dash across hostile borders, but demanding careful fuel management. NATO analysts pored over every scrap of information, desperate for a closer look at its radar, avionics, and metallurgy. The Smerch A radar, with its raw power and unique frequencies, posed a new electronic warfare challenge. Western engineers speculated about titanium alloys and advanced wiring, only to be surprised by the aircraft's pragmatic, sometimes rough-hewn design when they finally gained access years later. Even the cockpit layout, with its analog gauges and minimal comfort, spoke to a doctrine built for speed and altitude, not pilot luxury. The technical intelligence stakes were enormous. A captured MiG-25 would yield not just a leap in understanding Soviet engine technology, but also insights into radar vulnerabilities, IFF codes, and the real limits of Soviet aerospace engineering. For any defector, the gamble was not just personal survival. It was about delivering a prize that could shift the balance of air power across Europe. At low altitude, the rules of flight and survival change fast. Vronsky's stolen jet, designed for high-speed dashes above 10,000 meters, faced a different enemy just meters above the treetops: fuel. Flying so close to the ground roughly doubled the Su-7's fuel consumption, turning every kilometer into a gamble. With the landing gear left down, drag soared, bleeding precious kerosene from the tanks. Calculations show that a clean Su-7 at low level might last 20 minutes before hitting empty. With the gear down, that margin shrinks to barely 10 or 12 minutes. There was no room for error. Every adjustment on the throttle, every small climb to clear a hill, cost him seconds of endurance. Vronsky's limited simulator practice had not covered real-world fuel math or the dangers of flying into the radar shadow. He had to pick a corridor where NATO's radar coverage thinned, but that meant hugging the ground and risking a stall if he misjudged his speed. The escape demanded a perfect balance, low enough to vanish from Soviet and NATO scopes, fast enough to outrun pursuit, and precise enough to reach the border before the tanks ran dry. On a grey morning in May 1973, Grossenhain airfield was supposed to be quiet. Maintenance crews moved between hangars, expecting nothing but routine repairs. Without warning, the sharp whine of a jet engine split the silence. A Sukhoi Su-7 canopy closed, rolled out from the shadows of the hangar. At first, ground staff assumed a scheduled test, but the aircraft's lurching taxi raised alarm. Technicians shouted and scrambled for a vehicle, swerving onto the tarmac in a desperate attempt to block the runway. The jet did not slow. Vronsky, alone in the cockpit, throttled forward. The Sukhoi dodged the makeshift barricade, tires bouncing over the edge of the concrete. As the nose lifted, the landing gear remained stubbornly down, a detail missed in the rush, and one that would haunt the flight. The aircraft clawed into the air, leaving behind a trail of exhaust and stunned faces. In those seconds, Vronsky turned from mechanic to fugitive, and the base erupted in chaos. The flight ended as abruptly as it began. He was running low on fuel, and with no hope of landing a jet he had never truly learned to fly, Vronsky aimed for a patch of forest near Braunschweig. He pulled the ejection handle at low altitude, trusting the seat's automation more than his own hands. The Sukhoi Su-7 crashed through the trees, scattering debris across a quiet stretch of West German woods. Vronsky drifted down under his parachute, bruised but alive, landing not far from the wreck. Within minutes, local civilians spotted him and alerted the authorities. West German soldiers arrived, taking him into custody as a potential threat before the truth became clear. Asylum paperwork moved quickly. By the end of the week, Vronsky was granted protection, while Soviet officials pressed for his return. The aircraft's wreckage was handed back to the Soviet Union, stripped of anything sensitive. For the Soviets, the embarrassment was acute. For NATO, the real prize was the man who had slipped through both sides' defenses, now sitting in quiet custody, far from the Iron Curtain. Even now, the truth behind Cold War defections is buried in sealed archives and silent witnesses. In a world defined by shifting borders and rising mistrust, every untold story fuels today's information battles. The real escape is not just crossing borders, it is breaking through the walls of secrecy. Share your thoughts below.